This video covers how to find the value of x when given a probability for a normal variable without using a calculator. And for all of our examples, we're going to be looking at the wind speeds in a tornado that are distributed normally with a mean of 150 and a standard deviation of 25. So for our first example, it asks what must the wind speed in a tornado be such that the probability of being less than that wind speed is 0.375. So when you're given a less than probability and you're trying to solve for x, you're going to use your standard normal table and search for the probability on the inside. So here I've selected 0.37448 because it's very close to 0.375, and then I'm going to find the corresponding z value. And here my z-score is negative 0.32. So once I've found my corresponding z, I'm going to convert it into my x value. I can take z, multiply it by my standard deviation, and then add my mean. And here, if I calculate, I find that my x value for this problem is 142 mile per hour winds. Now if we look at the exact same problem but in terms of a greater than probability, now I'm given the probability of x is greater than some value is equal to 0.375. Again, if we're using the standard normal table, we can only read it in regards to less than probabilities. So if you're given a greater than probability, the first step is to take that probability and subtract it from 1 to rewrite the problem in terms of a less than probability. So now I can say the probability that x is less than some value is equal to 0.625. And then I can proceed as I did before, where I search for 0.625 in my table, I find my corresponding z, and then I convert that z into my x value. So for this problem, if I multiply by 25 and add 150, I get an x value of 158 mile per hour winds. As for the between problems, if it asks between what two wind speeds must a tornado be such that the probability of being between those two values is 0.60, this is where we're solving for two x values that hold 60% of the distribution. So before we solve this problem, let's first look at our distribution. The shaded region represents 60% of the distribution, and so that tells me that 40% of the distribution is not shaded. So if I take that 40% and divide it by 2, I have 20% on both sides of the shaded region. Now that I understand this information, I want to rewrite my x values in terms of less than probabilities. So the probability of x being less than x1 is equal to 0.20. That's because 20% of the distribution falls below x1. As for x2, 80% of the distribution falls below x2 because I would take my 20% and add the shaded region, which represents the entire curve that's less than x2. Now that I have my probabilities of 0.2 and 0.8, I can look up both of these probabilities in my z-table. So starting with 0.20, I want to find the corresponding z-value, which here is negative 0.84. And if I look up my 80% probability, the corresponding z-value is 0.84. So now that I have both of my z-values, I can convert these into x1 and x2 by multiplying by my standard deviation and adding my mean. And so in this problem, I found that 60% of the distribution falls between 129 and 171 mile per hour winds. You can see how to do all of these examples on a graphing calculator in the next video.